Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today I'm doing another episode of Memories of Blackpool and bygone days and growing up in Blackpool. And the subject of today's video is going to be childhood games in the school playground. Now, when I went to school, the girls and the boys played in separate playgrounds. The infants all played in the same yard, but once you got to the juniors, which was what today's kids would call year 3, 4, 5, 6, in my day that was junior 1, 2, 3, 4. Once you got to junior 1, you had to play in a separate yard, and there was a little like corridor or passageway, whatever you'd call it, between the girls' yard and the boys' yard in my school, and that would be strictly guarded by either a dinner lady or a school teacher, so the girls wouldn't run in the boys' yard and play. So what did the girls play in the girls' yard? Well, one of our favourite games that the girls enjoyed playing was what we called two balls, and if you remember that, it was simply two tennis balls which you would juggle against the wall, and as you juggled them you would say little rhymes, and for the first round of rhymes you would just juggle them against the wall underhand, and we called that plainsies because in our eyes that was just plain juggling. The second one, you'd throw them overhand, that was overs. Then you would have upsies when you just juggled into the air. For the fourth round you would do downsies, where you bang them on the ground in sort of a hit the floor juggle. And then the next one was underleg, where you would bounce it on the ground but under your leg. And then the next one was twisties or twirlies, when you juggle them above or against the wall but pretty high and try and twirl before you caught them. But two balls juggling, and sometimes you would juggle them to a friend and you would both juggle to each other. So that was one of the games we used to play. Another thing we used to play was, I can't remember if we actually had a name for this game, but you get a stocking, get your mum to buy you a stocking and put a tennis ball in the bottom of the stocking, then you just stand against the wall and kind of whack and flip the stocking ball on either side. And sometimes you would have a friend who would say, "Can I run in?" and you'd go, "Yeah," and your friend would run in between bounces to the ball and try to stand next to you. So there was two balls, there was a stocking ball, and a favourite game was elastic. You get about 1 metre or 2 of elastic, kind of like a waistband, a thin waistband or knicker elastic, about 1/3 of an inch thick. Tie a knot at the end so it was in a circle. Then two girls would stand opposite each other with the elastic around their ankles, about 2 metres apart, and everybody would line up and jump over the elastic. And sometimes you jump in little patterns, and we would have these little rhymes again, what we would say. And the one that sticks in my head as you were jumping, the little girls would chant 2, 4, 6, 8, Mary at the cottage gate, eating cherries on the plate, 2, 4, 6, 8. Then they'd jump off the elastic, and then somebody else would do the same thing and repeat. And if you missed your jump or you tripped over the elastic, you would swap places with one of the kids who had their ankles around the elastic. Or you would just jump on it, like jump, jump, and then go back to the queue. Because you would do jumpsies, where you just jumped over it, and the next one was hopsies, where you had to hop on it And then the next one was cross-legged, where you had to jump kind of with your legs crossed. And then the next one was, I think it was a backwards one, where you had to jump backwards. So yeah, that was elastic. So we've done the 2 balls, we've done the stocking ball, we've done the elastic, and there were like group games. And then there were games which the boys and the girls in the infants or in the juniors, just big groups of girls would play. And there was one that we called the Big Ship Sails on the Alley Alley O. Bit of a mouthful for a game name. And how we played that was everybody would just hold hands, so you're in a giant line. The girl who was at one end of the line would stand against the wall with a hand against the wall. She was the bridge. And then the person at the other end of the line, at the front, was named the puller, and that front person would run under the arm of the bridge and take the whole line with her until the whole line had passed through. So the kid who was the bridge would just stood there with the hands crossed, turn around against the wall, and you'd repeat that till the puller in turn had gone under everybody's arms. And then when everybody were just stood there in one line, all linked arms, they'd join up in a circle and just jump up and down singing "Oh, the big ship sails on the Alley Alley O" on the last day of September or whatever. And I remember playing that game because everybody wanted to be the puller and nobody ever wanted to be the bridge. But yeah, that was a fun game. An infant's game we played was called Stuck in the Mud, and it was sort of like tag twist, because it was like a game of tag, but when somebody tagged you, you would stand there with your legs apart, and you had to stand still till somebody crawled under your legs and they would free you. And I just remember when you'd be tagged and you'd just be stood there and you'd be yelling at the top of your little lungs, "I'm stuck," until somebody would breathlessly just run up to you and crawl under your legs and free you. And we did play ordinary tag, or TIG as we called it back then. And if you remember, there'd always be a base, but nobody agreed on the rules of the base. Like, nobody really agreed on where the base was and how long you can stand on base for, and how many people can stand on base at one time. Usually it'd be a little step or a little wall what you'd just run on. And then he remembers playing TIG and being barley. And I don't know where that word came from, but a kid would run up to you to tag you and you'd go, "I'm barley." You'd be like, "Oh, we can't tag him, he's barley." And I don't know where that came from. And then another weird one, I don't know if it was just in my school or it was a thing for all kids, but you'd touch your arm and go, "Injected," or "Jected," and somebody would come in, try and tag you with something, you'd go, "Jected," and that also somehow meant that you were allowed to be tagged. And then you'd go, "Touch my eyes, touch my ears, injected for 1,000 years." So apparently we were all, I think every single one of us, if we did that, we were all injected for 1,000 years. But I'm not entirely sure how that one worked. Another one we used to play, and this sort of got banned at one point, we used to play Red Rovers, and I love that game. Everybody would, well, there'd be 2 teams and you'd all hold hands facing each other, and one team would shout, Red Rover, send insert name over," and the person that had to run over would run across as fast as they could, aim themselves at what they perceived to be the two weakest hands in the opposite chain, and you'd try and run through. And if you could bust through the hands, you got to go back to your own team and take one of the people whose hands you'd busted through. But if you couldn't break through, you had to join their team. And eventually that game got banned in our school because a couple of the kids complained that they got hurt. And then there was British Bulldogs, and I think that involved just, I can't remember the rules of British Bulldogs. I used to think it was similar to Red Rover, but I think it was different. And I think you just had to run across and kind of rugby tackle people to the ground before they made it, but I can't remember the exact rules for that one. The infant game we used to play when we were in the very first infants, and it was the first playground game I ever learned, and I'm sure you've all heard of this one, and you've probably played it with your kids, maybe, I don't know. We used to play What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf? And somebody at the front would stand with the back turned to all the other kids, and all the other kids would sneak forwards and they'd go, "What time is it, Mr. Wolf?" And the person playing Mr. Wolf would go either 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and eventually if you were Mr. Wolf you would turn around and go, "Dinner time!" and you'd turn around quick and chase all the kids. And the idea of the game was you had to sneak and get close enough to Mr. Wolf so you could tag them on the shoulder, and if you were Mr. Wolf you had to not be tagged on the shoulder, but you had to grab one of the kids. So you'd want them to get as close to you as possible, so you'd be like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock. But you wouldn't know where they were because your back was turned, and you would just hope they were close enough to grab but not close enough to tap your shoulder. But I mean, oh gosh, sorry, I nearly tripped then. But I remember as a little kid playing What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf, and you'd really panic, not in a scary traumatic way, but in a little kid way. You'd be like, "Oh, it's going to get me, it's going to get me." Then you'd turn around and you'd just run for it. So that's all the games I can think of for now. If you can think of any more playground games, please let me know in the comments. I'm sure people will say things and I'll be like, "Oh man, how could I have forgotten that?" It's like when I was talking the other day about school dinners, and I was talking about the sponge pudding and custard, and somebody said in the comments, "What about the semolina?" And I can't believe I forgot the semolina. I used to love the semolina. Oh, I think I was the only kid that liked it on my table, but yeah, I really enjoyed the semolina. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and my little reminisce about school playground games, and I shall see you all very soon in the next video. Goodbye.